Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's issue of Soya and Bela's World. Soya is away tonight. She is on a top secret diplomatic mission for President Trump, so she's not going to be with us. Hopefully, she may or may not check in. It just depends on where she is and what she's doing at this particular moment in time. Anyway, I'm Bumi. We're here with Bela Sebro, and our special guest tonight is the Honorable Malcolm Hoenlein. He is the president, or actually retired now. He was the president of the Conference of Presidents of Jewish Organizations of the United States of America. And I believe, Malcolm, is it correct that you are still, or you still are president of Jerusalem Central Synagogue in Israel as well?
Well, I'm still associated with the Conference of Presidents. I am president of the Great Synagogue of Jerusalem and Limud FSU and of
many other and highly
many
affiliated
other
and running many other very important organizations. Malcolm, I'm going to address you directly first. The other night, put out a theory as to why Donald Trump pushed so hard to get a deal through, which to me and to many others seemed to be most problematic when you consider the scaling of the amount of Israeli hostages that came out versus the amount of bloody terrorists that were released in exchange for those, for that handful of Israeli hostages. Why did he do that? I mean, he's so supportive of Israel. Why did he push so hard for, to me, what seems to be such a disequal, almost a surrender by Israel to Hamas, to these monsters? Can you give me your perspective on what might have been going through the president's mind?
Yeah, I think that that this wasn't President Trump's deal. I think that it started in the previous administration. I think Netanyahu faced a situation that was becoming both domestically and internationally more and more complicated. The families, the hostages, the mass of the people wanting to see a resolution, the humanitarian concerns, and the knowledge that the treatment that was being meted out to those who were being held in these tunnels, and what we saw in the last few days with the three who came out looking, as President Trump rightly said, like Holocaust survivors. I think that it was a combination of pressures to try to come to some sort of a deal that would at least begin to get people out. There was two phases, as you know, and they're now supposed to be negotiating the second phase. Hamas just today, as we are speaking, announced that they would not proceed because they're saying Israel didn't live up to their humanitarian obligations, when in fact thousands and thousands of trucks of food have gone in. In fact, they should be cutting off all the aid until all of the prisoners and the hostages are released. And as you noted, a disproportionate ratio for the terrorists who are being released, many of whom have blood on their hands, many of them with life sentences for the murder of the Jews, including children and women and men in terrorist attacks and in horrendous acts. But Israel's motto is never to leave anyone behind. The domestic pressure for it was overwhelming, and everybody knew that time was running out. I have a theory that maybe they just let go those who looked the best initially, and now we're beginning to see the conditions. And when you hear the reports of these men, they were hung by their feet, that they couldn't
upside
walk.
Down. Yeah.
They forgot how to walk. They had to retrain them before they left. And, I guess they gave them some food also for the days before they leave, but they can't compensate for the months and months and months of deprivation, of malnutrition. They were emaciated, and many of them have heart conditions. And one can only imagine what condition the others are in.
Right.
Assuming they are still alive.
If they're still alive, right.
Or those who are.
Right. Mr. Hoenlein, first of all, I just want to say welcome. I'm not the only one saying this, but today was a very distressing day, hearing that Hamas will not be releasing any more hostages until further notice. This is a severe violation of the hostage deal where they were supposed to be releasing 3 hostages every Saturday. We know that the Prime Minister of Israel is convening a situational assessment with the families of the remaining hostages that are supposed to be released in the first phase of the deal. They were personally updated regarding the situation, and Israel has issued a message saying that they view this as a very severe violation of the agreement. And we know
Bayla,
that
now that you mention this,
yeah,
I've been,
and the minister,
pardon
right,
me,
the Minister of Defense has put the army on highest alert for any and all situations. So, Mr. Hoenlein, in all truthfulness, we could have written that script. How could anyone in their right mind ever assume that Hamas, a terrorist organization, would ever abide by an agreement, a ceasefire deal?
Well, you're raising questions. These are practical questions. You're right about the expectation. We know what Hamas's track record is. We know who they are. They're
Yeah,
barbaric.
yeah.
There's no deal. There's no word that is a word with them.
No, no.
And
They
they
tell you the
were,
time. Go check your watch.
and they were, collecting all of this time, as we learned now, huge amounts of aid, of money. And there's one report that came out that they were prepared in last December to make a deal to return to turn over even Sinwar, but to give all the hostages. And that morning, they got a huge infusion of AID money from the United States and said, reneged then and moved on with the continuing to hold the hostages and not negotiating. They do nothing in good faith. These are barbaric individuals. And the truth is that no other country would put up with this as well. Jews value life. Our enemies value death. They put the highest value in sending their children to die.
Oh,
We
yeah.
do everything to keep them alive.
Right. In
So
fact,
you're
when they're
asking,
pregnant, they hope that the child they're carrying will martyr itself.
and say so. But you're asking very legitimate questions that will be debated and discussed. They were in the past. We've never come up with a better answer. We traded for Shalit, what Israel traded 1,200, I think, at the time.
1,200, correct.
And it's a bad precedent. It set a standard. Now they're only doing 183 last week for the three. But I think that the international community did nothing to come to Israel's aid aside from the United States. We see the pressures that the international community was building, and as Israel began to break the lockhold of Iran with its circle of fire, as they set back Syria's collapse, taking out Iran's defense system, which put them in a much weaker position, breaking Hezbollah, breaking Hamas. The hope was that this would usher in a new era, a new situation, which may yet replace this Shiite extremists, might be replaced by Sunni extremists led by Turkey and Qatar and others who are trying to build their own ring of fire.
Well,
with
one
Egypt
devil
and
for
others.
another. It doesn't seem like we can
Yeah.
get out of that ring.
So knowing that, as you rightly put it, Israel is often left with no good choices. But the first choice they do is valuing life and the
Yeah.
life and sending a message that we leave no soldier behind, no hostage behind, live or dead. And whether it's bodies we negotiate for, we bring them home. Then I think Israel should make a decision what to do to those responsible.
We exchange people for monsters. We're willing to do that. Bayla, you spoke about this whole
It's
thing.
mind-boggling.
Bayla, was there any response or any comment by the Trump administration? Has there been anything yet to what you had just revealed to us all?
Well, from what I heard, President Trump said that they must all be released by Saturday, or all hell will break loose. I mean, that is what he said.
That is true. And he said it
At
several
this point,
times.
at this point, from what I understand, he's saying that they all have to be released.
Uh-huh. Well, I like to hear that. But you see, Malcolm, if I may, Mr. Hoenlein, I originally said my thoughts about why President Trump pushed this deal through. And you explained the situation, the circumstances around it, why it seems so imperative that we get whatever we can, as much as we can, as quickly as we can. But to me, it did seem at the time, and I think a lot of people recognized this particular agreement as problematic because of the disequilibrium involved in something like this, and felt that the president was pushing something that should never have been pushed, and that it was considered to be a disastrous agreement or a disastrous deal, and something that essentially causes Israel, pushes Israel to effectively surrender. But my thoughts at the time when it first happened was that President Trump initially said, if the hostages are not released, all hell will effectively break loose.
You're saying that again.
And I said last time on our last podcast, President Trump is not a person that can lose. He must win. And I think he took a step back and he thought about it. And he said, hey, wait a minute. What do I mean by all hell will break loose if they don't get back, hostages are not released? Am I going to put boots on the ground, American boots? No. Am I going to be able to just go ahead and lay waste to what's left of Gaza, something that America could have allowed Israel to do if Israel was barbaric or savage, or not nearly as savage, if they had been anywhere like those compliant Palestinians that are supporting Hamas, could have laid waste. He couldn't allow that to happen. To put more financial pressure or more sanctions would take time to begin to work until it would reach the point where it actually starts squeezing Hamas. I think he backed himself into a corner, at least that was my view, where he could not put anything behind his words. It was not speak softly and carry a big stick. It was just the opposite. It was speak strongly without the stick in this particular case. And I think that's the reason why he felt, boy, I got to do something to save face now for the moment. Get some hostages out as an excuse so I don't have to take any drastic action beyond that is expected of me at the moment, so that way I save face for myself.
Well,
that was
you raised very interesting and important points, but we have to take one at a time because it's a very complex issue, obviously.
Well, that's why I have you on.
Right, but you raised and very articulately raised the questions that people in Israel are debating, people outside. Look, it was ultimately Israel's decision. And remember, let's analyze. Israel has limited capacity. They had people serving 300 days out of last year in reserve. The 46,000 small businesses collapsed. The Israeli society, Israeli economy was suffering under the absence of the workers and the people. There were many conditions. I don't want to enumerate them all, but you also had a multi-front war. You had the Hezbollah war, which was executed well, but you see they still have to fight it now. They're still asking for another extension. And of course, the Hamas war. But you have another war, and that is, and I'm not putting aside the Houthis and I'm putting aside what happened in Syria for now, but the war in the West Bank, in Yehuda and Shomron, which is a much more threatening war because you're talking about in the heart of Israel, and we see how for weeks Israel has been operating there after a series of operations which found huge stockpiles of weapons. Turkey and others have been infiltrating weapons, and Iran have been infiltrating infiltrating weapons through Jordan into the West Bank, into Yehuda and Shomron. They were organized. You've seen the pictures of the caches that they found, of the manufacturing facilities for weapons that they found, and when they blow up the houses, these explosions and secondary explosions because of the rockets and rifles and other equipment that was stored there. So for them to be able to have the manpower to handle that and to be able to focus on that. I will say also that I think Israel was running low on ammunition. And as you know, the Biden administration held up the shipments in the last months of it's not something you tell your enemy and you go public with so that they are alert to it. But now the administration since has sent them equipment and some stronger weapons, including larger bombs. But it takes a long time, and it's stuff that Israel's paying for. It's a fortune. There's, of course, some of the weapons are covered by the U.S.-Israel agreement, the military agreement that gives them over $3 billion a year in assistance. So when you take each of these pieces, the conflict in the West Bank and having to divert attention, manpower, and weaponry there, I know that tanks going into Gaza were given 6 shells at times, six shells because they didn't have enough. And people paid dearly for it. I'm not going to detail, but I heard it directly from soldiers who were there. that when they saw a building and they knew it was booby-trapped, but they didn't think anybody was in it, they bypassed it. And it turned out, of course, terrorists were there and they shot at Israeli soldiers as a result because they husbanded every shell. So that's a big weight that you can't tell the public. Second, about the manpower, the resilience of the Israeli army is unbelievable. The continued sign-ups and recruitment superseding the requests. But look at those 5 girls who went through hell, and what did they do this week? They asked to go back to re-up. They
Right.
asked to go back and serve with their units.
Unbelievable.
You see how I was in the
That's
hospital.
These are
Jewish
unbelievable
women,
people.
I
the
was in the
courage of
hospital.
Jewish women.
It's
And I
one
was in
reason
a-
why I am always so proud to say that my mother served in the Israeli army. My mother was a chayelet. She had 3 stripes. She was one of the head secretaries to Moshe Dayan back in 1956.
Wow. So no wonder she kept you in line. So so
I got one now.
but look at the guy. I went to Hadassah Hospital. I saw guys who had just come who had been wounded, some of them fairly seriously, some even losing a limb. And what did they say to me? Help me get back to my unit.
Yeah,
Help me. Tell them
yeah.
I want to get back. So number one, you're dealing with an amazing generation of people. The resilience and the commitment of the people of Israel. They still rank amongst the happiest people. You see the economy, despite everything, is remaining strong. Israel today was ranked amongst the 10 most powerful countries in the world. After the burdens that they've had, who fought a 7-front war? A little country. We forget how small Israel is. And so the prime minister has to take all of this into account. And when he's making a decision, and when his committee comes back to him and said, listen, this is what we can get. We can have a chance to redeem a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen people. It's very hard to say no to that.
So I'm
So
hearing
it's easy to be
things from you.
armchair generals, in armchair generals, but when you have to face the reality, it's a lot different.
So, Malcolm, if I may, I'm hearing, let me just narrow it down to 2 things that I'm hearing from you. I'm hearing from you, number one, that Israel, in fact, also needed a breather for multiple reasons, combat reasons, economic reasons, for multiple reasons. Israel itself needed a breather, and this was the breather.
Right.
Number 2, you do support Netanyahu all the way, it looks like you. And as a matter of fact, as leading all these organizations, you do support him, and you believe he's doing the right thing at the right time.
I support the democratically elected government of Israel. I've worked with every prime minister virtually, certainly in my lifetime.
That is correct.
And whether they were left or right, it's not our vote, not our decision. But I remember people, who used to be critical of Shimon Peres, and I certainly disagreed with him and directly with him, had a great relationship with him, because this is the guy who found Dimona. This is the guy who helped establish the IDF. I tell him, we don't polish their shoes when it comes to... But
you and Bibi now, you and Bibi.
I am very close to Bibi. I've been friends with him since 1982. We've worked together over the years. I see him whenever I go, or most of the times when I go to Israel, and I respect what he's doing. I don't know who else could take his place right now. There will come a point where I think his time will have elapsed, having served longer than any prime minister. But we saw how he handled himself with President Trump. And by all measure, this probably were the best visits. Look at the smile on his face, and the way Trump went out of his way to show respect to the prime minister, holding the chair for him and putting that picture out, showing him walking out of the White House to greet the car.
That was a beautiful. That was a beautiful
sight. I like Bibi very much. I always have. And would you be so kind, Malcolm? Might you be seeing him this next time you go to Israel? Give him a hug from me.
I leave this week, and I will be sure to tell him. Maybe not a hug, a handshake.
All right, but a handshake from me, okay? Let me get to part B of tonight's program, okay? This is the second half. We're splitting this in 2 pieces. Now we have part B, and as you probably are aware, Bela, Malcolm, the idea that President Trump put out there, and I happen to like it, of now emptying out the entire Gaza Strip, rebuilding it, giving people a chance to live in other places peacefully, and then somehow turning it eventually into a new Singapore or a new Riviera, whatever you want to call it. What's your take on the whole thing? Will it happen? Is it something that Trump just threw out there because then he will back away from an extreme position? He needed to go all the way. Will it happen? Can it happen? What do you see?
I'm one who believes almost anything can happen. Number
Right.
one, let's just put a few facts on the table. In 2005, when Israel pulled out completely in a very controversial move, removed their communities, removed everything, left them the greenhouses, left them the beautiful beaches with resorts. And in 2007, they elected Hamas. They destroyed everything. They brought upon themselves the situation. It's not Israel that did it. And Israel left crossing open. The electricity and the gas came from Israel. But they would take the pipelines, the pipes, dig them up and use them to make rockets out of it. Then Israel is blamed that the gas couldn't flow. If they had used the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tons of cement and infrastructure that they put into the tunnels, and instead with hospitals and businesses and factories and schools, you'd have had very different circumstance. Also, when they look at this circumstance there, and the president put out this very bold vision, and you can disagree with it. I don't believe that he ultimately really means that he wants to buy it, and he says he doesn't want to have engagements abroad. He wants to reduce our footprint and the military footprint. But he's right. It could have been a Garden of Eden. There were sections of Gaza where the elite of Hamas lived, which were comparable to any beautiful suburb or area with the best stores, the most modern products, all during the war, functioning completely. If you look at their stores,
and beachfront
well,
property.
that's what it should have been, and that's what that's what it should have been back in 05.
And could have been.
Right,
been,
and it should have been, and it could have been, and even just recently, President Trump said the same thing. But now things have changed. Now with this breach of the ceasefire, and what I'm thinking, and my take on this, Mr. Hoenlein, and I sincerely hope to God that I am wrong, but that Hamas, that this ceasefire was breached. Hamas either has no one to release anymore, or the hostages are in such bad shape. So instead, they're projecting it on us and Israel for breaching by saying, "Oh, you shot the 400 that were coming to the border yesterday."
Maybe
So
buying
they didn't
time,
shoot.
buying
They
time
thought
to
only 4 were shot, and they were breaching the agreement. But you know that 40% of the people in Gaza before October 7th said they wanted to leave Gaza. Today, a majority of people want to leave Gaza. So are we telling them they have to stay there? Second of all, many of them are not native to Gaza. And if they are, then they're not refugees in their own country. If they're not, then refugees can be moved. I mean, refugee populations have been moved before. Also,
you
the
can't
area
remain eternal refugees like the UNRWA.
that's right. But look at the conditions there. 70% of the houses have been destroyed in the fighting that took place because they were being used by Hamas as fronts and as to harbor terrorists.
right.
So there isn't a place, and a lot of it is toxic. So they have to clean it up. It could take many years. What do the people do? Wander around, live in tent cities? Why not put them in many of the Arab countries that have huge amounts of space?
No, they
that
don't want
could
them.
be
The other countries
settled.
don't want them.
That's true. They don't want them and they don't trust them. But there are places, Morocco, Puntland, Somaliland, that has been talked about, where the people could be given a chance to build their lives or to go to their
Elon Omar
family
country.
in other places. That in Europe, the Europeans that keep telling Israel what it should do. Why don't they do it? So you have a population that wants to leave, a large percentage of them. You have a population that has no infrastructure to take care of their needs. And why is the burden on Israel, which has pulled out, that they're the ones who have to give them the electricity and the obligation for the food, and et cetera. And Israel yet takes on these responsibilities, has tried repeatedly to create a circumstance where the people could live there, but they can't anymore. And I think after this war and after the barbarity that was demonstrated, I think once and for all, we have to have a solution, not another agreement that will only mean in a few years we'll be back to the exact same circumstance.
So what is the rest of the world saying now? What is the rest of the world saying right now that they breached the ceasefire? Is Israel still the bad guy?
Yes, Israel will always be the bad guy, and you know what? They know that they have allies, that is the Jewish community and non-Jewish friends around the world. The majority of Americans stand with Israel. Even now, majority of Americans say that Israel should finish the job with Hamas. We have polls of the last days that show it. And despite what you see on the campuses or what ye or others may say, the fact is that most of the American people see through the lie, understand what this threat of terrorism means for all of us, that this is not a war against Israel, it's a war against America.
It's a war
Israel
against
is
the
just the
world.
front line and taking the brunt for the West and particularly for America. Look what
Well,
what
we are
Iran
the
says.
vanguard. Israel, not we.
But
Israel is the vanguard in the global jihad against Western civilization. This is a
right.
global jihad. They believe in the idea of a 12th Imam, and they believe in the idea of global conquest, that they will turn everybody, Jews, Christians, and all other religions, into Muslims. And that's their version of the Messiah, as opposed to the Judeo-Christian version of a real Messiah that comes and fixes the entire world. It's a whole different.
And the Iranians, look what they put on their missiles: death to Israel, death to America.
Yeah.
Right.
But America is still the major goal. And for that they get support, whether from Russia, China, others. We see the shifting sands there. But I can tell you that in the last weeks, I've had calls from people from different countries that have not called in years, and Muslim countries in various parts beyond the Gulf and the Middle East, who want to have relations with Israel, who are looking to renew it. The president sends a message, and in Middle East, perception is more important than reality. If they perceive that the U.S.-Israel relationship is back on a firm footing, that Israel has the special relationship back, the other countries then come rushing to it. When they thought that America was leaving Israel, and that when they see aircraft carriers pulled out of the Red Sea, even if it's not the reason, they say, oh, you see, American is not committed to our security, not committed to Israel's security. President Trump's message is we are committed and to the strong U.S.-Israel relationship that is obtained through the years, and that will be strengthened. And that creates a perception on which decisions then are made by the governments in the region.
Okay,
Yeah.
one more question for me, and I'm going to pass the baton to you, Bela, okay? What President Trump did say, and what he has doubled down on, the idea of having them move out of Gaza, has that effectively, for once and for all, put this concept, this idea of a two-state solution, which has been tried again and again and again and again, when it has failed again and again and again and again due to the obstinance of the so-called Palestinians, who have absolutely rejected it time again and again and again. Does this finally put this idea to rest? It's no more. Or does it not?
It's a great question. And the answer, I think, is that number one, it has taken it off the agenda for now. Everybody was pressing it. Nobody talks about a two-state solution. Most Arab countries and leaders.
Or for good?
Yes, you got me right. I said for now. In most Arab countries, governments, they don't really want a Palestinian state because they know that it'll be cancerous. I can tell you that every Arab leader that I met during the war kept saying to me, tell Israel, finish the job, decimate it, don't leave any, they're a cancer, it'll metastasize. If you leave Hamas in power, if you leave Hezbollah in power, don't. And they don't want to see a Palestinian state because they know it will become a base of operation for all the extremists. So I think for now, that the idea of another formal state is off the table. There could be solutions. People, Bibi and Prime Minister and others have talked about various approaches that would give more autonomy. If you saw today, the president of the so-called Palestinian Authority announced that they're ending pay to slay after all these years, and all the money that was paid, $147 million paid to the terrorists who got out of the prisons. Now he's saying that he's going to pass a law to end it, and that they would only get the regular welfare that everybody else gets as based on their need. That is unbelievable.
Man, he's
righteous. But he asked in return that we end the Taylor Force law, which is pose sanctions on them for continuing to pay and to people. And the more they killed, the more they got paid.
Isn't that automatic? The minute the pay to slay comes to a complete end, Taylor Force has no reason to continue to be in effect.
Exactly right. And there's no reason to remove it. It's a safeguard against reasserting
against them redoing
coming
it,
back in a different form.
Okay, Bela?
Yeah. So before I want to go on to another topic, and that's going to be our last question for the evening, but Israel is preparing for something big because the IDF began to cancel all vacations and call thousands of soldiers back to their units in preparation for a powerful maneuver in Gaza. So this is the latest that I heard. But I just want to touch on something else, and then we'll finish for the evening because we're running out of time. We thank you so much for joining us. After all these years, people are still obsessing over JFK's assassination. And following Trump's order, the FBI has uncovered approximately 2,400 records related to JFK's assassination that were never handed over to the board responsible for reviewing and releasing the documents. What is your take on this, Mr. Hoenlein?
There's so many books written on this, and this is so far beyond my pay grade and my expertise to be able to second guess what. But I do think that shining the light of truth on this, exposing the information after all these years, I don't see how anybody could be jeopardized if there was a source or whatever, that the information should get out, because you have all of these conspiracy theories, all the people who exploit each of these issues. And what we have to do is provide and trust the American people can handle the truth, and that they be given the facts in all of these circumstances. We see today, and it's very troubling because of the advent of the internet and the cable positions, that all these guys, the Alex Roses and the Yees and all the others, exploit the situation, and then with some hint of truth or doubt that somebody has, they exploit it, and then therefore build credibility for stuff that is totally lies, totally distortions, total misrepresentations. So I think that getting the truth out in most of these cases is valuable, as long as it doesn't compromise any person or America's security.
Well, the question will, I guess, the truth will be in the pudding, in terms, seriously, in terms of were all these theories, these conspiracy theories, were they accurate? Because 2,400 records were released, they were uncovered. So there's got to be something in there.
Hopefully, we will get answers, and I'm sure, as Malcolm said, everybody's curious to find out what the true answer really is. In any event, again, Malcolm Hoenlein, ladies and gentlemen, it's been an honor to have you. You've been enlightening, eloquent, always as great as you've been on the radio show. We had you several times in Sawyer's World Radio, and I thank you. And I want to wish you a wonderful, safe trip to Israel.
Thank you.
You should go in good health and come back in good health and bring us, hopefully, really good news that things are getting better and that there are more hostages released, and we're looking towards a peaceful conclusion, in the very, very near future. And again, my warm regards to Bibi from me, please.
Thank you. I will.
And
I will tell him.
It's been an honor, Malcolm.
Thank you so much.
Bela.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
night,
Thank you so much.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.